Rebecca didn't glow when she got pregnant. She didn't jump or scream or rush to the phone to tell her family. She just sat on the edge of her bathtub, one hand gripping the edge, the other holding the stick that finally said the word she'd been begging God to write for 15 years. Pregnant, at 40. She exhaled once, softly. A tear slid down. Then she stood, opened the door, and walked out into a house that didn't feel like it had changed at all. "Daniel?" She called into the hallway, no response. She didn't expect one. His car keys were gone from the hook, and so was the man who had spent the last decade telling her, "It'll happen when it happens. Not if, not soon. Just when." Like it was the weather. Like it didn't matter. She didn't tell him that night. Not yet. Something in her wanted to hold it a little longer. The news, the joy, the proof that God hadn't forgotten her after all. Instead, she walked into her kitchen and opened the fridge, staring blankly. The clock ticked behind her. The only sound in the room. She'd imagined this moment so many times. How she'd scream, cry, call her sister, call her mother, kneel beside her bed and thank the heavens. But instead, she just poured herself some orange juice, sat down, and stared at the calendar. A red circle glared at her from the end of the month. Choir fundraiser, St. Catherine's. She had agreed to help months ago. Another distraction, another way to pass time, to stay busy, to keep her faith louder than her disappointment. Rebecca used to be a marketing executive, a good one. She'd worked 10-hour days, flown across states, led campaigns, managed teams. Her boss had once called her the sharpest voice in the room. She had loved that, but work hadn't loved her back. Not when she started bleeding after the second miscarriage in a boardroom. Not when she collapsed in a stairwell at 7 weeks pregnant and lost her third. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. Your job is killing your body's ability to carry. She quit after that. Not because Daniel asked her to. He didn't care either way, but because she realized she was giving her best energy to a life that wasn't giving her anything back. So she gave that energy to God instead. St. Catherine's became her second home. She joined the women's group, started helping with charity drives. She sat quietly at every mass, hands on her lap, waiting, not for a miracle anymore, but for peace. She was 25 when she married Daniel. He was 30 then, a real estate consultant with a clean smile and a deep, calming voice. People said they looked good together, the soft one and the strong one. They called him a good man because he paid for everything without blinking, never raised his voice, and held her hand at family dinners. Rebecca's mother adored him. Her sister said she was lucky. Even when the miscarriages happened, he never blamed her. He just said, "These things happen. Don't carry it on your chest." He made grief sound like a cold. What they didn't see was that Daniel had no interest in adoption, no urgency, no faith, and no fire. She had asked once, maybe twice in her softer moments, "Should we look into other options?" He'd shrugged. "Let's give it more time." 15 years of time. One day she found a church bulletin in his drawer. She smiled. "You went to service?" He raised a brow. "No. Must be one of yours. You leave those things everywhere." She didn't think much of it. After all, Daniel didn't believe in God. He'd said it clearly the week they got engaged. "If faith gives you peace, go for it. Just don't ask me to pretend." She'd tried to make peace with that. She'd convinced herself that marriage didn't require spiritual agreement, just love. But over time, that love started to feel lazy. Daniel didn't cheat. He didn't yell. He didn't lie. He just faded. That's why when she finally stood in that kitchen, newly pregnant at 40, something felt off. Because Daniel still wasn't home. Because his phone went straight to voicemail. Because the joy wasn't bouncing off the walls like it should have. Rebecca pressed a hand to her belly. There was life in her now. But the silence in her marriage felt louder than ever. 2 days passed before she told him. He was at the table, scrolling through listings, sipping coffee like nothing in the world was shifting. "I have news," she said. He glanced up. She placed the test on the table slowly. He stared at it, then looked back at her. "That's great," he said. Pause. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "You don't seem surprised," she said. He gave a small shrug. "We've been waiting a long time. Maybe I ran out of surprise." And that was it. He didn't touch her stomach, didn't ask when the doctor's visit was, didn't ask if she was scared, if she needed anything. He just returned to his phone. That night she sat in bed staring at the ceiling. She whispered, "God, thank you. I know you did this." Then after a long pause, "But if you gave me this child to wake me up, I'm listening." Rebecca didn't immediately become suspicious, but she started noticing things, not big things, not even enough to raise alarm. Just cracks. A sentence that didn't match the calendar. A scent that wasn't hers. A silence in the house that felt too familiar to feel safe. And once you notice a crack, no matter how small, it's impossible to stop watching for the wall to give way. It began with a hymn. Not a popular one, not the kind you hear in every Sunday service or choir warm-up, but a Latin communion piece sung only during Lent. Rebecca was humming it while folding laundry in the bedroom, her fingers tracing the edge of a baby blanket she'd bought online, soft, white, too early for anyone to see. Daniel walked past the doorway, phone in hand, and as he passed, he whistled the same tune. She froze. He was already halfway down the stairs. Did he just... She stepped out and called after him. "Hey," he paused near the bottom. "Yeah? Where did you hear that song?" "What song?" She hummed the first few notes. Daniel blinked. "Oh, I don't know. Probably from you. You hum a lot lately." He smiled, then disappeared into the kitchen. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't even suspicious, except Rebecca knew she hadn't hummed that one in years. And unless Daniel was secretly tuning in to Gregorian chant radio, there was no reason for him to know it. The next day, she found a pacifier wedged between the passenger seat and the center console of his car. Rebecca had dropped her phone in the crack while getting out at the pharmacy. As she reached down to retrieve it, her fingers brushed something smooth and round. She pulled it out slowly. Yellow. Silicone. Slightly used. She stared at it in her palm, long enough for her breath to stall. Daniel had no nephews, no nieces, no friends with newborns in town, and certainly no reason to be transporting baby items in his car. She waited until she got home before asking, "Babe, where were you yesterday around noon?" Daniel didn't even look up from the kitchen island. "Work." "Where exactly?" He raised a brow. "What's this about?" "I found a pacifier in your car." He blinked, then laughed softly, like she was joking. "That must have been from the open house last week. One of the buyers had a baby, I think. They brought their kids." "You think?" "I don't keep track of people's children, Rebecca. I'm selling houses, not babysitting." The way he said it, so calm, so dismissive, made her feel small. So she dropped it. For now. But she tucked the pacifier into the pocket of her church tote. Not out of paranoia, out of habit. Because Rebecca had stopped trusting things that disappeared too quickly. Later that week, she and Emily were reviewing roles for the upcoming choir fundraiser. They were seated at one of the smaller fellowship tables in the church's side hall. The two women had grown closer over the years. Church had that effect. But even with closeness, there were boundaries. Unspoken rules about what you could say about someone's marriage. Emily had always respected that, but that night, she hesitated. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Emily said gently. Rebecca looked up. Emily leaned in, lowering her voice. "I saw someone in the choir rehearsal last month. I thought he looked a lot like your husband." Rebecca blinked. "Daniel? I wasn't sure. I mean, I've only seen him once at your place, years ago." "Daniel doesn't sing." "That's why I didn't say anything. But this man had his build, his posture, same haircut. He stood at the back next to Megan Porter." Rebecca looked down at her pen. Megan. The name clicked, but not hard enough yet. Emily kept going. "It's probably nothing. Just had me wondering." Rebecca nodded, smiling politely. "Probably just someone who looks like him." But inside, her fingers gripped the edge of her tote bag until her knuckles went white. That night, she couldn't sleep. She looked up Megan Porter on Facebook. Private profile, choir pictures, a blurry photo of her holding 2 toddlers, boys. Rebecca stared at the image. She felt like she was seeing ghosts. She didn't confront Daniel. Instead, she tested him. Subtle things. You ever think of joining the choir? You ever been to a Tuesday night service? Remember that woman Megan from church? Each time Daniel responded like a man with nothing to hide. Me? In choir? I'd embarrass myself. Tuesday's the only night I can breathe. Who? One morning he left for a supposed site meeting early. Rebecca waited 15 minutes. Then she drove to St. Catherine's. Not for mass. She parked across the street and watched. Choir practice. They were setting up. She could see them through the tall church windows. She spotted Emily first. Then Megan. Then him. Daniel. No disguise. No hesitation. Standing in a robe, laughing quietly, holding sheet music. The air drained from her lungs. Her world didn't collapse, it pivoted. Everything she had believed, every moment of grace, patience, prayer, spun on its axis. She didn't go in. She didn't cry. She drove home, hands on the wheel. Tears refused to fall. Her body numb, her belly heavy with a child she had waited half her life for. That night, Daniel came home smelling faintly of candle wax and choir room dust. He kissed her on the cheek. "You okay? You look tired." She nodded. "I just didn't sleep well." He smiled. "Try tonight. You need rest, babe, for the baby." Rebecca nodded again. She watched him walk into the living room. She touched her stomach. The baby kicked gently. And for the first time since seeing that positive test, Rebecca whispered, "God, don't let him touch what you gave me." Rebecca had always believed that heartbreak would arrive like thunder. That when truth finally shattered your world, it would do so loudly, through yelling, through broken dishes, through a storm that made the air shake. But it didn't. It arrived through a PDF attachment in her email inbox. Subject: Updated choir roster, Easter rehearsals. From church@stcatherine's.org. She hadn't even asked for it. She'd been copied by the events coordinator by mistake. Her role in the fundraiser hadn't required it, but there it was, sitting unopened, waiting. And Daniel's name was on the 4th line under tenors. Right next to Megan Porter. Again. She stared at the screen. Her mouth was dry. He joined officially? He used his real name? It wasn't just a rumor now. It wasn't a hunch. It wasn't a friend who thought they saw someone familiar. Mail to church@stcatherine's.org. This was proof. Typed, documented, recorded. Daniel wasn't just showing up occasionally, he was a member. Her hand trembled as she opened her notes app and added it to the list she'd been keeping in secret. Evidence. Do not delete. Choir song whistle in hallway. Latin hymn. Pacifier in his car. Unknown child. Emily said she saw someone like him in rehearsal. Found him at practice wearing robe. Stood by Megan choir roster PDF, name listed. The list wasn't long. But it didn't need to be. Rebecca didn't need 1,000 puzzle pieces. She already saw the picture forming. She stared at the screen longer than she needed to, letting the quiet betrayal soak into her skin. This man who had refused to attend church for 15 years, who had said God was a waste of time, who wouldn't even join her on Christmas Eve services, had willingly joined the same church behind her back. Not just joined, sung, stood beside her, and worshipped next to his mistress. The baby inside her kicked for the first time that night. She cried, not from pain, but from the sudden weight of it all. She had waited so long for this child. She had held on so tightly to her marriage. She had loved so deeply, so faithfully. And Daniel had built a second life in the choir loft, just 3 pews behind her. The next morning, Rebecca walked into the church office. She didn't speak to the priest or the event team. She asked for Angela, the administrator who handled choir scheduling. "Can I help you?" Angela asked politely, adjusting her glasses. "I'm trying to cross-reference some contact info," Rebecca lied smoothly. "Can I get a printed roster for the Lent Easter sessions? I had the PDF, but I deleted it by accident." Angela smiled. Of course. She printed it and handed it over. Rebecca circled Daniel Wilson with a red pen, then she walked out. She didn't go home. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. She just stared at the ceiling with her phone on her chest, Megan's profile picture glowing softly in the dark. She needed confirmation. Not guesses, not feelings, facts. She remembered her father's advice from years ago. If you want to find the truth, don't ask questions, follow patterns. So she didn't ask. She followed. The next morning, she drove to a quiet office tucked inside a strip plaza just outside town. Suite 204. No sign on the door, just Carter Monroe, private investigations on the glass. He was calm, professional. Didn't ask questions he didn't need answers to. Rebecca handed him a folder of names, timelines, and church documents. I need proof, she said. I don't want drama, just truth. He nodded. Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, she came home to find a plain manila envelope tucked into her mailbox. Inside were two things. A brief summary report. 2 unofficial copies of birth certificates. Father, Daniel Joseph Wilson. Mother, Megan Elise Porter. Children, Elijah Porter Wilson, 3. Ezra Porter Wilson, 2. She sat in the car and stared at the paper. Her hands didn't shake, but her chest felt like it was folding in. She had begged God for 1 child. Daniel had made 2 in secret, and they were being raised in her church, beside her choir, behind her back. When she got home, Daniel was in the backyard. He was sipping lemonade, his sunglasses on, calm, silent, at peace. She stood inside staring at him through the kitchen window. 2 sons. 2. She had begged God for 1 child. Daniel had made 2 in the shadows and kept smiling like life owed him no explanation. That night, she pulled up Megan's Facebook page again, still private, but her profile picture had changed. This time, she wasn't alone. She was holding the 2 boys, one on her hip, the other asleep on her chest, and Daniel was standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder, smiling, like a family, like a man who had never known another woman. Rebecca closed her laptop slowly. Then she picked up her phone and called Emily. Hey, Rebecca said quietly, can I ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Emily's voice came through fast. Of course. That man you saw in the choir rehearsal, you said he was with Megan? Yes. Did you get a good look at him? Emily hesitated. Emily, there was a pause. Then, it was him. Rebecca closed her eyes. Emily's voice cracked. I didn't want to believe it. I thought, maybe it was someone who looked like him. But when I saw that choir photo online, I knew. Rebecca didn't say anything. Why would he lie? Emily whispered. Why? Rebecca spoke softly, because he could. That night she didn't cry. She packed a go bag, just a few things. Toiletries, prenatal vitamins, her medical file, a change of clothes, not to leave yet, but to be ready. Because now, it wasn't about suspicion anymore. It wasn't about doubt or faith. It was about clarity. The next morning, Daniel kissed her forehead. Heading out early, he said. Got a walk through at that duplex downtown. Rebecca smiled. Of course. He left. She opened her notes app again. Added 1 final bullet. 2 children with Megan. Proof confirmed. Then she opened her camera roll and took photos of the birth certificates, of the choir roster, of the Facebook post, of Megan's full name. She placed them all in a digital folder and titled it Truth. And then she made the call. Not to Daniel. Not to Megan. To her lawyer. Daniel came home like nothing had changed. He kicked off his shoes at the door, tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl by the shelf, the one Rebecca had bought during their 3rd year of marriage, and opened the fridge like it was any other Tuesday. It wasn't. Rebecca had spent the entire morning sitting in the dining room, her back straight, her hands folded over her belly, eyes locked on the clock. She'd called him around 2 p.m., casually. Can you get home a little earlier today? I need help with the tax paperwork. He'd agreed easily. Too easily. He had no idea what was waiting. Hey, he said, walking into the dining room. I picked up Thai on the way back. Figured you didn't feel like cooking. She didn't respond, just nodded toward the chair across from her. He raised an eyebrow. You okay? She nodded again, but slower this time, more deliberate. Sit down, Daniel. He sat. The air changed. On the table were 4 sheets of paper. She slid them toward him one by one, slowly as if stacking cards before a final move. The choir roster, the birth certificates, the choir photo from Facebook, the screenshot of Megan's profile with the 2 boys. Daniel looked at them without touching. His face didn't change. Not at first, he just blinked once, then twice. Then a breath. Okay, he said. Not, what is this? Not I can explain, just okay. You lied to me, Rebecca said. Her voice was low, controlled, almost too quiet. I didn't lie, he replied. You had 2 children with another woman while I was losing babies over and over again, and you don't think that's lying? I didn't lie, he said again, firmer this time. I just didn't tell you. Rebecca flinched. Daniel leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Do you want the truth or do you want an apology? She stared at him. Start talking. He rubbed his face. For a second he looked exhausted, not guilty, not scared, just tired of pretending. You buried yourself in God. After the 3rd miscarriage, you disappeared into prayer and Sunday meetings and grief counseling. You weren't here, Rebecca. You were chasing miracles. She blinked. So you went looking for a woman who wasn't crying? I went looking for peace. And Megan gave it to me. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Peace? You made 2 kids with her, Daniel. It wasn't about the kids. Then what was it about? He leaned forward. You wanted to suffer. You needed to believe that God would reward your pain, and I couldn't watch you bleed for 15 years and call it hope. She stared at him, stunned. So you started a family in the background? I didn't plan it, it just happened. Twice. Silence. I'm pregnant, she said suddenly. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. You are? I am. He nodded slowly. Well, then we finally made it, didn't we? Rebecca leaned in. No, Daniel, I made it. You were never there. He swallowed. You're angry, I get it. No, you don't, because if you did, you'd know this isn't about anger, it's about betrayal. I never left you, but you left the marriage. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. You wouldn't even consider adoption, and I thought maybe that meant you didn't really want to be a mother as bad as you claimed. She stood up too. I didn't want to raise someone else's child with a man who couldn't even hold my hand after I lost my own. He turned sharply. Megan made it easy. Rebecca nodded slowly. And you chose easy over faithful. She walked toward him. Not angrily, just done. You could have told me. You could have ended this clean. But you came into my church. You stood in choir beside a woman who knew about me, who saw my face and sang louder. You stood before the cross you said you didn't believe in, and hid your sin behind hymns. Daniel's lips parted like he wanted to defend himself, but there was nothing left to say. I filed for divorce, she said calmly. Papers are being drawn. My lawyer will reach out tomorrow. His jaw tightened. You're going to do this while you're carrying our child? Yes, he'll grow up without a father. No, Daniel, he'll grow up without a liar. Daniel walked toward her slowly. You're not thinking clearly. You're pregnant. Emotional. I've never thought more clearly in my life. Rebecca, she raised a hand. Don't. For the first time, Daniel looked afraid, not of losing her, but of the finality in her voice. Rebecca stepped back, gathering the papers, folding them neatly. She walked to her purse, slid them in, and turned to face him one last time. I waited 15 years to be a mother. I will not let the father of this child build his life on lies and drag me into it. He took a step forward. She didn't flinch. And Megan, she added, she tipped me off. She wanted this. Congratulations. That stunned him. She? What? She sent the church roster to my email. I traced the sender. It was a dummy account, but the IP came from her street. Daniel sank into the chair behind him. Rebecca walked out of the room. She paused at the front door, her hand resting on her belly. We deserve peace, she whispered. Not perfection, just peace. Then she walked out, and this time Daniel didn't follow her. Because he knew it was over. That night, Daniel stood alone in his home office, a half-empty glass of water on the desk and the quiet hum of the fridge in the background. His phone was in his hand. He stared at a choir group photo Megan had sent earlier. She was smiling brightly, surrounded by other members of the church choir. Daniel wasn't in the picture, but he had been there when it was taken. He remembered exactly where he stood, just outside the frame. He zoomed in, then out, then locked the screen. His chest tightened, a feeling he couldn't name or refuse to. He leaned back in his chair, the room too quiet, too still. "You think she knows?" Megan had texted once. He never replied. Now, alone with nothing but the weight of his own breath, he whispered to no one, "What am I doing?" He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't even asking for clarity. He was asking the question men ask when they already know the truth and don't want to face it. He sat there for a long time. He didn't text Megan back, and he didn't stop what he was doing. It was Megan who called first. She called Daniel at 8:34 a.m., less than 12 hours after Rebecca walked out with the divorce in motion. "Good morning," she said, chipper. Too chipper. Daniel was seated on the edge of their guest room bed, where he'd been sleeping since Rebecca confronted him, phone pressed to his ear, eyes bloodshot. "Did you tell her?" Megan asked. He didn't answer. She tried again. "I'm guessing from the silence, she found out?" Still nothing. The silence between them stretched. Daniel could hear her moving around, a cabinet closing, a child giggling in the background, the sound of cereal being poured. It hit him then, how different her mornings sounded. No tension, no pacing, just noise and movement, a mother of two doing what mothers do. "She left me," he said finally. Megan didn't pretend to be shocked. She just exhaled through her nose. "You always knew she would, eventually. I thought I had more time. She deserved to know." He didn't respond. "You told her, right?" Megan pushed. Daniel's voice sharpened. "She found out." Megan paused. "You didn't tell her?" "I didn't need to. She had everything." There was a quiet, satisfied hum on the other end of the line. "Good." Daniel stood and walked to the window. The sky was overcast. His lawn hadn't been mowed in a week. He stared at his reflection in the glass. "You sent that email, didn't you?" Megan didn't answer. "The church roster. The accidental copy. That was you." She sighed. "I had to, Dan. She was never going to leave unless she had proof. You manipulated her. I gave her what you were too coward to give her." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You think this means we can just start playing house now?" Megan laughed softly, but there was a sharp edge in it. "We've been playing house. You just haven't been showing up." Daniel swallowed. "You made me believe you were safe. You were my peace. And now I'm your punishment?" She shot back. "You used my sons to trap me. I gave you sons because you said you wanted a future. You made them, Dan, not me." There was silence again. He could hear one of the boys, Ezra maybe, calling her from another room. She muffled the phone and responded sweetly. The kind of voice that made Daniel sick now. Because it wasn't sweet. It was practiced. Megan came back on the line. "You're scared," she said flatly. He didn't deny it. "You wanted me to clean up the pieces of your mess, Dan. Now that she's gone, you're realizing you have to live in it." Daniel hung up. He didn't throw the phone, didn't scream. He just stared at the wall. For 15 years, he had lived with a woman who loved him even through silence, through heartbreak, through grief. He had said she was disconnected, but she had been fighting every day to build, to stay, to hope, and now she was gone. And Megan? Megan wasn't peace anymore. Megan was mirror glass, reflecting everything he never wanted to admit. That night, Daniel drove to Megan's place. He didn't call ahead. She opened the door wearing leggings and a loose sweatshirt, one of the boys on her hip. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." Megan nodded. "Want to come in?" He hesitated. Then, no. He looked past her into the warm light of her house. Toys on the floor, crayons on the coffee table, a bottle drying on the sink. It was a life, not his life. "You tipped her off, Megan. You ended it." I pushed the truth out of the closet, Daniel. It was already there. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. You wanted her to find out. You were too weak to say it. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. The boy Ezra started crying from inside. Megan didn't flinch. I thought we were going to be together, she said quietly. I'm not ready. You've had 5 years. Daniel looked away. She stepped closer. I gave you something she never could. She gave me something you never wanted. Megan blinked. What? Grace, forgiveness, a home. You left that behind. Yeah, and it turns out the thing I ran to wasn't peace, it was noise. He turned and walked to his car. I'll be there for the boys, I'll support them. But don't expect anything more. He got in and drove off. Megan didn't cry, she just stood there in the night air, watching him disappear. Back at home, Daniel stepped into a house that felt emptier than it ever had. Rebecca's scent was still faint in the hallway. The baby books she'd stacked on the coffee table were gone. The framed ultrasound? Gone. The red-marked church calendar? Torn in half. He sat down in the armchair, the one she used to curl up in after long services, and realized he didn't even know when her next appointment was. He had 2 sons and 1 unborn child he might never meet. And for the first time since it all began, Daniel whispered something he hadn't said since he was 15. God, if you're real, silence. Just let her be okay. Rebecca never expected freedom to feel this quiet. The air in her sister's guest room was still, not lonely, not heavy, just still. Like the calm after a storm. She'd been there 3 days. No phone calls from Daniel, no follow-ups from Megan, just 1 text from her lawyer confirming the paperwork was in motion. She didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The first thing she did was unpack the baby clothes. It felt strange, almost too soon, but the act grounded her. On the bed, she laid out a small blue onesie with white clouds printed on the front, then a yellow one. Then a newborn-sized sleeper with soft cuffs and stars stitched across the chest. Each item she folded with care, not because she had to, but because she chose to. This child was coming, and she would be ready. Her sister, Naomi, gave her space, but hovered the way older siblings do. You okay? She asked gently one morning, bringing toast and fruit to the room. Rebecca smiled faintly. I'm getting there. Naomi sat beside her on the edge of the bed. You don't have to be strong all the time. I'm not. You seem like you are. Rebecca looked down at her stomach. The baby shifted. Maybe I just don't have a choice anymore. Later that day, she sat by the nursery window with a journal in her lap. She hadn't written anything since the second miscarriage. Back then, every word hurt. Every sentence was a prayer she thought God never answered. But now the words came softly. Not full of rage, not even of sadness. Just clarity. Journal entry, December 4th. I'm not sure who I'm writing to anymore. Maybe God, maybe myself, maybe to the little one who can't hear me yet, but who already knows the rhythm of my heart. I waited for you, through all the silence, all the hospital rooms, all the blood and blame. I waited, not because I knew you were coming, but because I hoped someone like you might. And now that you're here, I won't share you with lies. You won't be born into betrayal. You'll be born into peace, even if I have to build it from the dust. She closed the journal. Let the words settle. Then she stood and opened the closet, where Naomi had cleared space for the baby's clothes. 1 drawer. 1 shelf. That's all she needed. That afternoon, she received a voice note from Emily. Hey, just checking on you. Everyone at church has been quiet since everything. Megan hasn't shown up for rehearsal. Daniel either. Some people are talking. Some are pretending like they don't know. I miss you. Rebecca didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she opened her camera roll and deleted the screenshots. All of them. The choir roster, the birth certificates, the Facebook photo. Even the picture of Daniel holding hands with Megan behind the church, which the private investigator had emailed with the subject line, Proof. 7:32 p.m. Wednesday. Gone. Not because she wanted to forget, but because she didn't want her phone to remember what her heart had already released. Later that evening, Naomi brought over an old box from Rebecca's attic. "I figured you might want this," she said. Inside were photos from college, Rebecca and Daniel, smiling, carefree, younger. One of the photos had a sticky note still attached. 10 years from now, our house will be louder." Rebecca stared at it for a long time. Then she folded the photo in half, not out of hate, just out of closure. The next day, she visited St. Catherine's. Not for service, not for choir, just to sit. She wore a plain sweater, her coat open just enough to see the curve of her belly. A few people nodded politely as they passed. Some recognized her, some didn't. She sat in the back pew, alone. For 35 minutes, she said nothing, prayed nothing. She just let the quiet speak, and somehow the quiet said everything she needed to hear. The candle nearest the altar flickered gently. A wind outside shifted. A child somewhere in the front giggled at the wrong moment, and Rebecca smiled, because this peace, wasn't the reward. It was the beginning. As she stood to leave, she passed the bulletin board near the exit. The choir sign-up sheet had been taken down. Only a blank white pushpin remained. When she returned to Naomi's, her phone buzzed. A single message from Daniel. "Can I see you? Just once." No arguments, just us. Rebecca stared at it, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel fear or anger or heartbreak. She just felt steady. She typed her reply slowly. "One time, my terms, my place, tomorrow, 4 p.m. The knock came at 4:01 p.m., right on time. Rebecca stood in the kitchen of Naomi's home, her hands pressed gently on the countertop, eyes fixed on the front door. Her breathing was calm, not because she wasn't nervous, but because this wasn't fear anymore. It was final. She opened the door. Daniel stood there in a black sweater and jeans, a paper bag in his hand and something unreadable in his eyes. She didn't ask what was in the bag. She just nodded to the small sunroom off the hallway. "We'll talk in there." He followed her quietly. The house smelled like lavender and something warm baking, a comfort Daniel didn't belong to anymore. They sat across from each other, no table between them, just silence. Daniel set the bag on the floor beside him. "You look good," he said. Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't need compliments from him now. She waited. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know how to start." "You just did." Daniel shifted forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm sorry." Rebecca didn't flinch. "Are you sorry you did it? Or sorry I found out?" He swallowed. "Both." There was a pause. Outside, wind rustled through Naomi's front yard trees. A wind chime somewhere let out a soft, hollow note. "I wasn't trying to replace you," Daniel said. "Not as a wife, not as a mother." Rebecca kept her eyes on him. "Then what were you doing for 5 years?" He hesitated. "Escaping." He finally looked at her belly, a brief glance, then away. "I want to be part of his life." Rebecca's jaw tightened slightly, but she remained calm. "You want access now that there's no secret to hide." "I want to make things right. There's no version of this where you get what you had and what you hid and call that balance." Daniel nodded slowly, eyes falling to the floor. "I know, I never thought you'd actually leave." "That's the problem," she said quietly. "You thought love meant endurance, but I was enduring alone." He looked up. "You really won't let me in?" Rebecca leaned forward, her voice steady and clear. "You can be a father to your sons, all of them, but not at the cost of my peace, not on my terms. So I don't get to see him? Not unless I know you've changed, not unless he's safe from your secrets." "I was never unsafe." "You were dishonest, and that's worse than silence when you're raising a child." Daniel said nothing. The bag he brought, unopened, now sat like a weight on the floor between them. "What's in the bag?" she asked finally. He picked it up, opened it carefully, and handed her a small, wrapped item. Inside was a cloth-covered baby journal, the kind meant to record milestones. The first page read, "From the first breath, I was waiting for you." Rebecca looked at it for a moment, the kind she'd once picked out a dozen times in baby aisles. then closed it gently and set it aside. She closed her eyes and the memory took her. 14 years ago. The hospital room was cold, too white, too still. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, a thin blanket pulled around her shoulders. Her hands, clenched in her lap, were still trembling. The IV had just been removed. The nurse had offered warm socks and a ginger ale. She refused both. Daniel stood near the window, silent, arms folded, jaw tight. Not out of grief, just distance. No one said the word. Not loss. Not miscarriage. Not baby. Only, we're sorry. You can try again. This is more common than you think. She remembered reaching out for Daniel's hand. He didn't take it. He didn't even look at her. Can we try again? She whispered through cracked lips. His answer wasn't cruel. It was worse. Silence. 12 years ago, the second time, she didn't even tell anyone at first. She was 9 weeks. The doctor confirmed the faint heartbeat had stopped. The stress, again, work, travel, deadlines. This time she miscarried at home. Alone. Daniel had been on a business trip. She called him when it was over. He answered from a hotel lobby, elevator dings and laughter in the background. Are you okay? He asked casually. It's gone, she said. He paused. We'll figure something out. Then, I've got to take this call. She buried that one herself. No grave, no name, no closure. Just an empty journal page and a locked box under the bed. Back in the present, her hand rested on her rounded stomach. This time full of life, of promise, of choice. Daniel shifted as if feeling the weight of everything unsaid. Rebecca didn't look at him right away. Her voice came low, not angry, just tired. There was a final question lodged in her chest, and she was done carrying it. 15 years, Daniel, she said. 15. I invited you to church with me more times than I can count. Not for show, not to change you, but just to be together, to believe in something together. And every time you said no. She finally turned to face him. I thought maybe you didn't believe, that you couldn't pretend, and I told myself that was okay, that I could live with that. But then I found out. Her voice cracked. You went with her. She didn't have to say the name, but she did anyway. Megan. Daniel looked down, ashamed. You sat beside her, prayed beside her, smiled for the cameras like you were this whole new man. You gave her what I begged for, not just faith, but effort. She exhaled, sharp and small. So tell me the truth. Was it the sex? Was I that bad at loving you? At being your wife? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. He shook his head slowly, voice raw. No, it wasn't that. It was never about that. Then why? She asked. Why her, not me? He stared at the floor. Because I was selfish, he said. Because with you, I couldn't hide. You knew me, the real me, and I couldn't face that. So I ran to someone who only saw the version I let her see. He paused. And the truth is, it was easier to be good with Megan because I didn't deserve her forgiveness. I didn't have to earn anything. I didn't risk being truly known. Rebecca didn't move, didn't blink. That wasn't love, Daniel. That was escape. He nodded. I know that now. Daniel rose to leave. At the doorway, he turned one last time. I know you won't believe me, but I did love you. Rebecca met his eyes, voice steady now. Maybe, but I deserved more than love. I deserved truth. I deserved a man who didn't have to lose everything to see what he had. He hesitated, then stepped out. This time, Rebecca didn't watch him go. She returned to the sunroom, sat down in the same chair, and finally exhaled. It didn't fix anything, but it finally stopped hurting the same way. That night, Naomi found her folding new baby blankets and humming softly. You okay? Her sister asked. Rebecca smiled. I think I'm finally starting to be. Weeks later, as her due date neared, Rebecca walked alone into St. Catherine's one last time. The pews were mostly empty. A few choir members rehearsed quietly in the back. She didn't stay long, just enough to light a candle and sit in the peace of a place that had once held both her cries and her praise. As she stood to leave, she whispered something, not a prayer, just a truth. We're going to be okay. She stepped outside into the light. The wind was warm, the sky open. And as she walked down the church steps, she carried not just a child, but her own peace. 9 months later, the nursery was quiet. Rebecca sat in a soft chair by the window, rocking gently, her baby sleeping soundly in her arms. A single ray of sunlight cut through the blinds, catching the edges of a small silver cross on the side table. She looked down at the baby's face, peaceful, breathing slow and steady. "You are not born of shame," she whispered. "You are born of strength." She smiled, not the kind of smile that needed to prove anything, just the kind that comes when a soul finally rests. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel's house was quiet too. But for different reasons. The TV was off. The kitchen sink was full. A box of children's cereal sat open on the counter next to a pair of tiny shoes that hadn't been put away. The living room looked lived in, but unloved. Daniel sat alone at the table, a parenting book opened halfway in front of him. He wasn't reading it, just staring past it. The door to the back hallway creaked open. Megan appeared, dressed, holding a laundry basket. "You said you'd fix the drawer," she said. Daniel blinked. "I'll get to it." "You said that 3 days ago." No reply. "Never mind," she muttered, walking away. There was tension in the air, not explosive, just the kind that lingers after too many unspoken things. Flashback. 5 years earlier, the house showing was nearly done when Megan first noticed the wedding ring on Daniel's hand. He didn't mention it, and she didn't ask. Her husband, an expatriate banker, was out of town, again. The home Daniel showed them was beautiful. High ceilings, big yard, a room perfect for kids. Megan negotiated boldly. Charming, confident. She liked that Daniel didn't flinch. At the final walkthrough, her husband wasn't there. It was just her and Daniel. A pause in the kitchen, a comment that lingered too long. "If I were your husband," Daniel had said quietly, "I wouldn't leave you to do this alone." "If you were my husband," she said back, "I wouldn't have to ask twice." The deal was signed. The house became hers. And not long after, so did Daniel. That night, after putting the boys to sleep, Megan walked quietly into the hallway bathroom and closed the door. She sat on the edge of the tub, hands in her lap, staring at the floor. She thought about the fights she used to have with her ex-husband. Dramatic, loud, expensive. But at least he felt something. With Daniel, it was different. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just disappeared. Even while sitting in the same room. Megan looked at herself in the mirror. The makeup was still perfect. The hair curled. The image intact. But the truth? "I left 2 marriages thinking I was moving up," she whispered to her reflection. "And now I live with a man who looks through me like I'm a window." She wiped under her eye, careful not to smudge the liner. And deep down, she realized this wasn't a win. It was just another cycle. And she'd played herself into it. Daniel sat across from her, scrolling absently on his phone. "You've been distant for weeks," she said without looking up. "I've been tired." "You were tired with her too?" Daniel paused. "This again?" "You think I don't notice?" she said, voice calm but firm. "You got what you wanted, or what you said you wanted, and now you sit here like someone stole something from you." He didn't respond, because she wasn't wrong. Megan wiped her hands and turned toward him. "I didn't fight for this, so you could shut down." "You fought for this," he said. "Or you planned it." Her face didn't change. "Maybe both," she said. "But I didn't force you. You came willingly." "And now?" "Now?" Megan sighed. "I feel like I made the same mistake again." She walked upstairs without another word. That night, Daniel sat in the living room alone. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small framed photo. It was from his and Rebecca's 6th anniversary. She wore a blue dress, he wore a tie, they were laughing about something. He couldn't remember what, he just knew he looked happy, and now he didn't. The next morning, Rebecca's phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. "Hope you're both healthy. I'd like to be part of his life when you're ready." She read it, thought for a moment, then replied, "Thank you. He's safe, we're well, but we're not ready yet." No anger, no door slammed, just a firm, respectful boundary. Rebecca walks through the park, her newborn cradled in a stroller beside her. Emily is by her side. They laugh gently, the baby coos, and the sun lights up their faces. Peace looks like this. Across town, Daniel sits in his backyard, alone. One of his sons calls for him in the distance. He stands slowly, quiet, like a man still carrying the weight of his choices. Inside, Megan watches from the kitchen window. Her eyes are distant. Her phone buzzes. It's a message from a friend. Still thinking about coming to Charlotte? The offer's still open. She doesn't answer. Not yet. These lives used to be tangled together. Now, they move forward, apart. She stares at it. Doesn't reply. Not yet. Rebecca sits on a bench, watching the breeze move through the trees. She closes her eyes and breathes deep. Not in sadness, in peace. Some houses fall apart because of storms. Others because they were built on secrets. Sometimes the peace you've been praying for doesn't come from holding on, but from letting go. And the ones who tried to control the ending still didn't get the story they were hoping for. What would you do if you're in Daniel's shoe? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If this story got you hooked, like, share, and subscribe for more.